I'm really excited to talk about this with you guys. I've been just bursting with questions since I saw it. I understand that you guys have actually had an opportunity to be in discussion in a public forum like this before, but that was before the film came out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it was centered around Questlove's book.
My
so
book,
now
yeah.
which is about creativity and available now. And
Thank you for that, man. Thank you. No,
and
this
so
is
now we
about
get
you
to
now.
talk
Yeah.
about this. So we'll probably be saying a lot of the same shit.
Yeah.
But through the lens of the movie. Well, rather than sort of list the list of like a dozen or so vocations that I could for each of you, I'd love to hear each of you just kind of describe what it is you do in this world.
I usually try to keep it to whatever I'm doing right now. So I'm Boots Riley. I'm the writer and director of Sorry to Bother You, and that's all you need to know because it's in theaters right now. Further pressed, I'd say that I have been the leader of a group called The Coup since I don't know. We put out our first album in 1993, and I've been a producer and just been involved in various campaigns and started out as a youth organizer who started doing music in order to make what we were doing bigger.
Questlove, could you talk about what you do?
For the time being, I guess I'm a film connoisseur, and no, it's just seriously, like just right now, after seeing this, I feel like I've kind of paled in comparison. So right now, I'm just a Boots Riley fan, filmmaker fan, and the lucky seat in the house. No, I mean, okay, so I do the roots and all that other stuff. But I'm really trying not to make this anything about me, like, because I have so many questions about the film that I want to ask. So, yeah. So right now I'm just a film fan that big to do this. That's all.
Well, the talk is definitely going to be anchored in the film, so I want to talk about that first. But I think part of the reason why it made sense for this series to bring you two together is because we do talk a lot about creative process, and obviously that's something that engages you both explicitly, not just, hey, I make art, but thinking about what form that art should take, trying different things, which is rebellious in its own way. Boots, could you talk about the film a little bit, and then just everything we need to know to watch a clip, and then we'll take it from there?
Okay. So this is an absurdist dark comedy with magical realism and science fiction inspired by the world of telemarketing. It's called Sorry to Bother You. In it, Lakeith Stanfield plays Cassius Green, a black telemarketer with self-esteem issues and existential angst, who discovers a magical way to make his voice sound like it's overdubbed by a white actor. That white actor,
which it in fact is in the movie.
Yeah, it sounds to his friends like he's overdubbed, and that actor is David Cross. So, so how many of you have seen the movie? Yes. Okay.
How many of us have seen it 3 times, though? Okay, no.
Super fan status.
All right, cool.
Cool, let's play the clip.
So I should point out, and if you've seen it, you know that that Danny Glover's speech is severely edited in this, and he says a couple things. He doesn't just say, "I'm not talking about Will Smith white." He says, "I'm not talking about Will Smith white. That's not white. That's just proper." Just to defend his Philly native, and and then he explains what he's talking about, what the white voice is, and as a performance that even white people do, and there's a performance of whiteness that in fact inferring that I believe it's inferring that everything we're doing is a performance, but that performance is defined as something that's supposed to make it seem like everything's okay. and I think that that the bills are paid. There's no struggle happening, which I think is like the opposite of what many racist tropes of black people and people of color are, which is that these folks are savage and these folks are they have a culture that's insufficient, and that they're in poverty because of the bad choices they've made. And so that's almost on the other spectrum of performance, to separate oneself from that.
I mean, there are a few times throughout the film where the idea of there's racial identity for you, there's racial identity within your community, and then there is an aspect of performance. Sometimes, there's a couple of pretty explicit scenes where the character is asked to do some specific activities because he's a black man in a mostly white space. Questlove, could you talk about if this is something that you've thought about, your relationship to this idea in personal, professional life?
First, I have to say that everything about this film has spoken to just my journey in life. Like, even before I saw this film, Dave Chappelle used to always joke that, in life, there's two codes. Two codes of communications for black people: Ebonics and what he called job interview, of which, is, but just at one point, because I literally started out as a telemarketer.
I didn't know that.
A month after, this is literally everything that's happened in this film. No, I'm not kidding. I got a job as a telemarketer a month after I graduated high school to pay for the Roots demo. And then kind of the choices in life that you have to make to better yourself that you feel that might not be that damaging to your friends or whatnot, to belong to a community, and then the separation of that community. I'm trying not to spoil alert it or whatever, but some of the guilt that you feel because of your personal elevation versus your community that you initially started with, issues with that particular scene that you were talking about, to do certain actions, which it's the equivalent of dance, tap dance, that sort of thing. The idea of being in environments in which the sort of fetish, the fetish culture of when other people are sort of interested in your one-dimensional life, or seen as a primitive exotic. Someone told me long ago that it's you have this great primitive exotic thing going on because the way you look, and then your it's but then when you speak, it's like you went to Harvard and da 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 da. So it's almost the first 3 years, that whole I let it work for me. Okay, you speak so well that whole thing that even Obama had to go through. He's so eloquent. Everything about this film was just, oh my God, it was fucking with me. And it was almost like at the end of it, I sat in a bar. I first saw it at the Nighthawk in Brooklyn. And I just sat there and I just kept pondering, what was my life? Because everything I saw in this film, I related to it and never thought that I could even tell people about this without the mocking of, oh, Questlove, and the little small violent, that sort of thing. So it's almost thanks. No, that's why I'm here. I never knew that anyone else even thought on that level of just the pardon my French, the mind fuck that it is when you're an isolated person in a workspace with people that are not like you, and the amount of metaphorical tap dancing that you have to do to sort of maintain your sanity sometimes. It's crazy. So,
Well, I'm glad that it reaches people. That's one of the most exciting things about this is, folks being able to talk about things that they didn't have the catalyst to talk about it with first. And so, yeah, thanks for sharing that too, because I feel like a lot of these things are things that we know. Like nobody thought this stuff was a secret, but nobody really. Often people don't talk about what other things it drives, and talk about it in the context of people thinking of their existence. I wanted to make a character here that was different than, I don't know, and I'm hoping I'm wrong and someone could tell me, but I hadn't really seen any other black characters portrayed as even thinking about themselves in the context of time and space and in the context of the world, or and thinking about them and why they're here, and as far as I know, I think that's something that's universal that humans do, right? And usually when black characters are created, even the ones that are supposed to be sympathetic characters, it's all about, I just gotta pay the rent, or I gotta, there's this thing I'm trying to climb and be on top of the world or whatever, but it has nothing to do with, like, we lose the humanity there. And so that's why that part is there in the first scene.
It's funny you say that, because I believe it was in the Poetic Justice director's commentary or somewhere that I saw, when you're on a tour bus and you watch movies, whatever, Criterion Collections, and you watch all the director's commentaries. John Singleton made a point about Tupac's character Lucky, how initially he said his point was to make him the first existentialist black character ever on film that thought about his existence. And there's a scene like when they're on the beach and none of them are talking to each other and they're just thinking in their heads. And I remember him making such a big deal of the fact that you never see black characters think and ponder about their lives or whatever, and that sort of thing. And then he said that he was forced to edit, like, for the sake of time. Like, that scene was like way sprawling and longer, in which Tupac was thinking about, if I have a future, will I live to be this long? Will I have kids? Can she be the mother of my children? Like, that sort of thing. And it was like he was so proud of that moment, because he's like, never in the history of film has he ever seen a black character have any thoughts outside of kind of the one-dimensional box or caricatures that film characters were allowed to have, especially back in like 1994. So yeah, I definitely noticed, like, wow, you actually manifested like something that I saw 20 years ago, or tried to see 20 years ago in Singleton's film, that he wasn't even able to bring forth.
And so you're saying he cut that out?
He had to cut it out for time's sake. Yeah.
Boots, one of the things that you touched on just now is also the idea that if you have like, perhaps there have been some strides in allowing a black character on screen to have a more like existentially deep experience, but it has conscribed qualities. Like, they think about making rent, they think about like where their mom's gonna end up or what have you. And I think, your film not only is pretty narratively radical, but there's clearly a lot of thought in how to make it aesthetically radical too. I think what you described happens not just in terms of what story points are available, but an example that I've liked to use from the last couple of years is Moonlight. That when I watched that, it like blew my mind that this director was using La Paloma to tell a story of like inner city 1980s Miami, and that like as an artist you can use whatever tools make sense to tell the story, not that like X equals Y. If you're a black person in this sort of socioeconomic place. You only listen to this music. We only make films that look like this. Can you talk a little bit about the filmmaking process, like how you wanted it to look and the tone and the rhythm and how that all worked with sort of your political message?
Yeah. So first, being someone that has had music that gets categorized as political, and I say categorized as political because I think all art is political. It's all having a viewpoint in some way, and especially scary is the art that we think is not political, because it's just repeating the status quo, so we think that it's just quote unquote regular, or something like that. But because of that, I've realized that my best bet is I never was able to make something that other people were doing. I wasn't good at that. Is just to make something that I love, and that means me being open to all of because early on it was with the music, it was like, this is what hip hop is. All these other influences I have are not what hip hop is. And so let me carve out this thing that I think people want. And it didn't work either. And so I was like, okay, well, if it's not, that my best bet is to make something that I really like, even with all of my influences that might be strange, might be weird or whatever, or just, and by that I just mean not usual in that genre. So taking that same thing, with this film, I was looking for a feeling that I hadn't seen in a lot of film, and that represents something about life, and what I kept trying to put forward, even before we got people on board to help me make that, was this idea of a beautiful clutter that a lot of times when people get the ability to do their thing, especially like in black music and sometimes in independent black film, I've noticed this idea of, we want to show that it's quote unquote quality. So it's clean. Things are, sparse and, kind of like, and I would also get that critique from folks in Oakland sometimes when because it's a small town, and when you come from a place like that, people say you represent them, and they really mean that, like you're an elected official and you gotta listen to me, right? Like, you need to be making your beats more clean. You representing us. This needs to sound like this, that sort of thing. And so it's this aesthetic that I think is very attached to other things, that is kind of maybe the opposite of what sometimes is considered like a punk aesthetic, kind of real rough around the edges. That's considered like, oh, you didn't have enough money to do it right, or something like that. But I think then that discounts a lot of other things that really are black, like kind of a collage thing, like a Jacob Lawrence sort of a thing where you're putting together all of these pieces. And I think that aesthetic exists in our life, and sometimes when we make art, we get rid of that. And so I wanted to lean further into that feeling. So I, just kept collecting pictures that, like, his room is from a picture that I got from a documentary about what's Bob Marley's producer for the early stuff. No, Black. Lee Scratch Perry. Lee Scratch Perry in one of his documentaries, he has kept Bob Marley's room preserved, and there's a picture of it with all the stuff, and we just copied that room, and it was, basically we put our own stuff there, but it was like, I was like, that's his room. because that went for that aesthetic. So I went for that kind of chaos and messiness. And there's a filmmaker that I love that does that, more of the chaos part, which is Emir Kusturica. He has some racist parts of his films, but I still get something from it. So he has a film called Black Cat, White Cat, and another one called Underground. And there's the movement. He has a lot more movement in the camera than I do, but there's this kind of chaos that happens. So I wanted to put that into the production design. And I also, I wanted to make sure that we pushed the envelope, but not too much. I wanted the world to be recognizable, but we needed to push it with colors and with sizes of things, and still kind of keep it cluttered and filled with things. And that even went to the costume design, where Deirdre Govan, our costume designer, had it layered with all kinds of different prints and things like that. And if you notice, as he climbs the ladder, things get cleaner, things get colder, and really, I took it upon myself to just re-enroll myself in film school, basically. Not literally. I started out in film school, and when we got our record deal, I had been in film school, and I quit. But this was me now knowing I am gonna make a movie. How do I learn more about this? And it's a different kind of learning than maybe when you're in school. You're like, this is gonna happen, so here's what I'm taking in. So I did everything from, there's a book called The Visual Story that I got a lot of help from. It's by Bruce Block. I had heard that out of all people, it's like a Bible of Pixar, yeah. And it really just kind of helped me organize my thoughts about it, because I had all these ideas, and it helps you think about things in terms of rhythm and chart it out and things like that. So it gave me that, and it also gave me vocabulary. Even in music, I don't really have the vocabulary, but the musicians I work with know what I'm talking about when I say make it sound like a wet Corvette on a Saturday night. They know what but there are terms for that. I just don't know it. But when you're working with 100 people, you need to know the terms, because it's going to be hard to explain that. And so that helped me out a lot.
I have a question. Knowing artists the way that I do, and pure artists, I noticed that their number one character trait, sad to say, is sabotage. There's two types of artists. There's mass-produced artists that are very effective in generating their art, and they do it in mass quantities, and they have these grand ideas and all that stuff. And then there's artists that have that spark, and then they'll put a teaspoon of self-sabotage in there, and it never manifests. I just for the sake of numbers, I would like to know, from the moment you said, I'm crafting the script called Sorry to Bother You, to completion, how long did that take? And knowing the uphill battle that you had, I don't know what your grand vision of it. I didn't know if you thought okay, well, we're taking this shit to Cannes, and then which, I mean, I'm not saying that some filmmakers don't have those grand visions of conquering the awards, or they just want to complete it and they're satisfied, and some want to conquer the world. But just from the spark of the idea to developing it to fruition, to when you first handed your first script to whomever it was, what was that time period?
Well, the spark of the idea, it's hard for me to trace it, but I can trace to where I was sitting in a hotel room and just tired of what I was doing at the time. And I had been saying that I was going to write a script, and I just went on finaldraft.com and bought Final Draft.
Oh, not the beta version, but the actual.
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone gets the
gotta be a
beta
first
version and thinks that I'll get away with that. That's dope.
Yeah, but you can't save it. So so
I know.
I did do that
I
first.
know.
I got the free version. I was like, oh, I could
That's
just
when I
use
gave
this.
up. I was like, oh, fuck it.
And I sat and downloaded and I sat there and I wrote started writing like a quarter of a page and it formats it like so that it look, because I wouldn't know what the exact format is supposed to be, but it's like, oh, description. Here's a description. Cassius Green sits in the manager's office holding a trophy. And it looked like a script. I got it like a quarter of a page down. I was like, damn, I'm writing a script. And that was 2011. That was early 2011. And by early 2012, it was done, and I had already started working on an album. And mid 2012, we put out an album of the same name, which was my idea was I'd have this album. And originally, when I started writing it, I was like, look, I'm gonna make this one location workplace comedy, and I will get just me and whatever friends I could get to be in it. It's gonna be one location. We're gonna do it for $50,000. I'm gonna get Epitaph, which was the label at the time, to like give me like just the promotion money, and we're gonna just do this, and that'll be the promotion. But every time I kept taking that journey with because what I did was I knew there was gonna be at a telemarketing, in the telemarketing world. I knew there was gonna be a struggle, but and I knew the opening scene because that's how my friend Rob Ebo always got his jobs, but he never got caught. And
so that was real?
yeah, and he would be like, he'd have like, it would be like the busboy at the restaurant. He would be his friend, and he'd be like, tell people to call for Juan. He's the manager, but Juan is the busboy. Right. And the person would call and ask for Juan, and like, oh, I'm calling about Robert Ebo. Anyway, so.
Wait, I'm sitting here smiling like, yo, I need to try that. Like, I'm gonna actually go for the Mater D job at 11 Madison or something. Like, okay.
And then I knew there's an argument because we're streaming. We're gonna not talk about certain spoilers before they happen. But there's an argument scene that happens between Cassius and his friend Sal outside the telemarketing office, and that had happened to my little brother like years before, and I always like, man, I'm gonna put that in a movie one day. So I had those, but I didn't have anything else. And I just, after that interview scene, I was like, oh damn, this is gonna be boring if we have to stay in this office. And so I was really like, okay, now let me take him home. Oh, we can figure that out. Maybe make a bedroom in the same building that we do that. And then, like location-wise, it just kept growing and growing. And, but also, I kept figuring out, like, for me, when I'm creating, I realize I'm all with it. And I think a lot of people, the first thing that you do when you imagine something is sometimes very cliched. Like, if you think of us, like, I'm gonna write a love song, it's gonna fit into, you're gonna think about these parameters that are already there, because a lot of times what's in our mind is really not so much our experiences, but the experiences of other artists as they fed it to us. So, for instance, I've never been to Delhi in India, but I have a picture in my head of Delhi and what people are wearing on the street and what the cars look like and the sounds and all that. And I've never specifically even seen a documentary about Delhi, but I know I've seen James Bond movies and stuff like that that have put these pictures in my head. And so if I were to write a scene about that, it would have that. So I've already learned that I have to like parse out my real experiences, and more just like not because on some, because maybe, you know, who knows, maybe cliche is all right, maybe we want to sing the same song, maybe there's something unifying about that, but for me, like, I think that it helps me to like not do that and to have stuff that represents my experience. So I'm always thinking about, well, what's my real experience here? Like if you write a breakup scene, you see so many breakup scenes that look the same, say the same thing, but if you've ever broken up with somebody, it doesn't fit at all, that dialogue. And so this is me like figuring out, okay, what do I think about this? And then when I really get down to it, I know that my thoughts and my experiences have a lot to do with my ideas of it in context. So all these ideas I have about the world, philosophical ideas, if you will, or whatever. And how do I get that in there? Do I have like a character come say, well, you know, this is the way it is, you know, message, and, you know, or, and what I found was easier and more effective, let's say, like by easier, not feeling forced, is when I bent the reality of the world that I created. Because then it kind of reflected back onto the reality that we have here. So then I started kind of going down that, like started this out not knowing there were going to be fantastical elements or absurdist elements, but then realizing what I needed to talk about was best reflected with those things, and that just kept going anyway. So 2012, we put out that album. It didn't. That album did not help us get this movie made, and so by 2014, I had given up. I had gone through a period of being like, well, maybe I can't get this made. Maybe somebody else could direct it, and then I could direct the second movie I write. And I had even hit up this dude, Richard Day.
Oh.
Yeah, and
did?
yeah,
okay.
And he was like, "Look, man, I'm not gonna direct this, but I'm also gonna demand that nobody else directs this but you, because nobody else is going to, you know." In the script, it's like very detailed because I wanted people to read it and feel like they were watching the movie.
Wait, I just have one interruption. Who's your inner circle? Like, chefs will have sous chefs and like at least 7 or 8 people to say, okay, that needs salt. Or if you're in a jam session or if you're with musicians, there's a collaboration process. But and even people that write books will give, you know, pages of manuscript, whatever, and say, what do you think? Who are you, like, do you have access to?
For screenwriting? I created an inner circle, but when I started, I didn't have one. You know, I kind of just reached out to people. Like, to get in touch with Richard Day, I just had all my Twitter followers
stalk him?
Yeah, hit him up and say, follow Boots Riley. He wants to DM you.
Yeah, I'm learning so much today, man. That's awesome.
And yeah, and he was, and so I didn't have him, and I had hit up Ted Hope. Ted Hope actually gave me some notes. So I like really like just kind of stalked people and like got them to, because first of all, nobody wants to read a musician's script, you know?
What part 2 was, how did you get them to take you seriously? Like, I know one of your actors on this, I know how they finally, their eyes were open like, oh shit, via their assistant who read the script was like, yo, you really.
That was David Cross.
Yeah, Cross was going to.
So David Cross
curve you.
David Cross and Patton Oswalt were the first ones to sign on to this when there was no money, no nothing, no producer, and it was because I'd done a show I had with him like years before, and I had his email. Hit him up, said I got this script, and he was like, sure, send it to my house or whatever. And what I found out later was that he had no real intention of reading it. Because again, you know, as a musician with a script, like, of course you want to make a movie. You probably also want a clothing line and to do a restaurant. And so, you know, you just want to do shit. And the quality is suspect, right?
Because you guys are both artists, could we talk for a second about Tessa Thompson's character? And I want to for a couple of reasons. One of which is, well, or I guess the main one is that tension of trying to make your art, but also trying to be aligned with like labor movement, like be sort of being on the right side of social justice. And I think your film plays with a lot of that tension. Like the joke that's in the trailer where he's railing at his like working class uncle about like the workers' movements and being like a corporate fat cat, and he's like, but I am your uncle, you are my family, and you're dependent on me. So that, you know, how do you work with that tension and build it into the script in a way that's, you know, pokes fun, but doesn't also make you feel to make it feel totally futile to try and like push forward with a better economic system?
So I've been answering questions like this a lot on this tour, and I really came to me right now that I really don't know. You know, like I have ideas of what I did, and I think that's like the scariest part is like you're like, okay, like so many people are explaining to, you know, in reviews, like this is what he did.
I felt like she was your voice.
Definitely.
I
Me
felt
too,
like,
actually.
okay,
That's
which
sort of-
one? Then I felt like she was you.
Yeah, well, in reality, I wrote all the characters as myself. I did.
Imagine if you played all the parts.
And that was the way that I ensured, like I put humanity in there. It was that, like, I feel like I think that we all are way more alike than we are different, and it sounds like some hippie shit. But
You're from the Bay Area, so
you know, but really, like, we use different, you know, we've been through different situations that cause different things. Anyway, so I wrote it like someone playing chess with themselves. So if it's an argument, you know, like I'm doing that. I didn't write it like, this is what that kind of person would say. I got in tune with my, the aspects of myself that was like that person. And for all intents and purposes, all those characters, the main characters are just parts of me. There's the artist, there's the organizer, there's the person trying to figure out why the hell they're here and what they're going to do with themselves. And then there's the dude that's just saying funny stuff or doing funny stuff to kind of deflect things. Anyway, so let's be clear, though, the actors did bring a whole nother layer to it. But there's a conflict there, a conflict and an alliance between the artist and the organizer. And that's like the struggle that I'm always having. And yeah, I think that the artist is the one I'm closest to, that I you know, whose conflict, the conflict that she's having is one that I'm always dealing with, and actually one that the film itself is talking about and questioning.
So I have one more question, then I'd love to open it up to the audience. And this is for each of you, which is about like the kind of work that you do outside of what's on screen or in your music. You've both explored such a variety of things, and I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, but kind of the link that I see between your organizing and you moving into like this culinary space is that maybe it's partly about like in the street, being in the streets, I guess, like being in a community and present in a community and bringing people together. But I'd love to hear you talk about it.
I guess for me, once I started my Fallon day job, that allowed me. I've always been a person more interested in the engine more than the actual car. And the journey to me was always much more fun than the actual destination. And so for me, observing writers' rooms, watching comedians struggle, like, you know, it's one thing to see Patton Oswalt or Chappelle or whoever, Chris Rock at, you know, Madison Square Garden or that thing, but it's a whole nother thing to watch them struggle for 2 hours at, you know, laughing in Cleveland or some. But to me, that's the best part of the whole process. So I guess that my favorite thing of all is to watch a community of people. So if it's a bunch of chefs, I always wondered, like it started with a question like, do chefs have jam sessions? And then I found out my answers like, yeah, we have ideas where we just sit and think like, okay, how can I make this vinegar and this salt work in a kid's Saturday morning cereal? Which instantly your mind's like, yeah. But then, or I once watched a chef make what he called a banana split out of a tossed salad. And somehow he managed to organically grow these, the lettuce tasted like vanilla, and he grew these tomatoes that were like strawberries and everything. Like with my eyes closed, it was like, yo, this is really a Mr. Softy's banana split, but I was eating a salad, So just to watch the creative process, that's the part that like fascinates me the most. So I guess when I'm not creating, like I'm more get off watching other people struggle, not struggle in a negative way, but sort of deal with their A, B, C, D, F, G options of their craft before you get to the end. That's why I love documentaries. That's why
I was going to say you have documentary filmmaker brain.
Yeah.
You want to watch how it happens.
And speaking of that, there's a bartender in Ypsilanti, Michigan that can make a cocktail shot that tastes like whatever food you ask for. So they could make.
I'm there. Wait, how do you know about Ypsilanti? Is that Gesundheit? Wait, how do you pronounce it?
Yeah. Ypsilanti.
You from there? Okay.
Yeah.
Wait, y'all sit next to each other and didn't know that?
Just on tour. And that was like the most amazing thing. I mean, I wouldn't want it every day, but you'd be like, yeah, I wanna, how you say it? Gyro. How you say it? I don't know. Gyro.
Yeah.
I want a gyro. She'll like put these.
Well, that would be
together.
A strange thing to ask for, but
no, because you're trying to stump her.
Oh, exactly.
You're trying to, because ice cream is easy. Yeah. Anyway, I just want to, No, not for salad. For salad, it's not easy. For salad, it's not easy.
Now I got to make a pilgrimage up there to test her gangster. Did I? Oh,
what was the question?
I guess like the experience of organizing, why you still do that, and why that's an important part of work and life for you, and what it does differently than making the film.
Well, I mean, I have to admit, like, I've been an organizer at different times in my life, and for me, it's hard. I can't do both, Like, I'm not good at writing. I just do it, like, and it takes a long time for me. Like, I have to sit there, and I always forget how to write an album. And then I'm sitting there struggling, doing mechanical things, like, let me put this together with that, and it just doesn't. And then all of a sudden I remember, oh, this is what I do. And then it, then it like really gets going. But I, even though I know that, and I consciously know that, like, it's just something with my brain, and I just do it. So it takes up a lot of my brain space, it takes up a lot of my time. And when I don't have that time, I'm not happy with what I've made. Although I've made some songs that people love, like 5 Million Ways to Kill a CEO, I lied and said that the first only way we could get the album out on time was if the first single was in 3 hours, and I made that, like right then. That's like a one, like I normally wouldn't be able to do that. But anyway, so it takes up a lot of my time. And then when I'm organizing, that's also an art, like talking to people, all sorts of problems happen. Everybody's arguing. People want to kill each other, all that sort of thing. And, you're figuring out your place in that and building relationships. And so, I've had times in my life where I've quit doing the music and done that and start. So, but the organizing really informs the music. It like helped me to think about what how people talk, what people think about, what are the things that matter, what are the actual questions that I need to be asking and answering, and
who are you speaking to? Like who's listening? You know?
Yeah, definitely. So, but you know, a lot of times people will throw that on there, and I can't correct everybody every time, like organizer. But I feel like there's a way where I could use that too much in an opportunist sort of way, and the reality is that it's usually one or the other. But as an artist, I try to lend myself to other campaigns and like, okay, you need us to perform, or you know, you need me to speak or something like that. But I separately from that, because some people are watching it, I also think it's lazy to get the coup to your political rally. Like, you know, huh? No, it is, because the people that are going to come see the coup are going to be at your rally anyway.
Speaking to the
choir. You know, like you need to get somebody else and, you know, break outside of that bubble and bring somebody else to your rally.
And I have to say on that note that it was really satisfying to watch a film that's, you know, fun and big and pretty punk rock, that's also kind of nitty gritty about how a union works and like how like labor movements work, and why they're important. So I think that came to the screen.
Can I jump can I be the first of the audience people to ask a question? I told you, I'm not even here to promote me. Do you, not the technical word of jinx, but what I'm saying is that now that the heat is on and the buzz is around Hollywood, I'm certain that everybody and their mother is coming to you like, yo, you know, develop, or come to Paramount and develop this, or shoot this Netflix movie for $42 billion or whatever. So not are you worried about the sophomore jinx, because I assume that you have a few other scripts in your arsenal, but will you feel superstitious about breaking the creative process that got you here? Only from a musical standpoint. I'll put it this way. When the infamous 1997 flood happened in Staten Island in the RZA's basement, then he was like, well, we're super platinum now. Let's go to LA to this glamorous studio out here and create these Wu-Tang records. And then the quality totally changed because he wasn't in that dingy basement making those 6 classic Wu-Tang records that his environment. Or when Prince finally got Paisley Park, suddenly the work got more cleaner and it wasn't in his bedroom. So as far as your process and your creative process is concerned, are you going to stick to the same coffee shop that you wrote the script in and the same bedroom? And like, are you nervous at all about now that you will have a budget and that sort of thing?
I mean, you think about that, especially if Questlove is jinxing you by asking you.
I'm sorry.
The problem.
No.
Publicly.
Because I'm certain now you will have a super budget and you could buy a building and have a staff.
Yeah,
and
but
yada,
if
yada.
my budget gets bigger, then my, you know, like wherever my budget is, the thing I want to do is over here. So it's always gonna be like a relative thing, but and because I've had 20 years of wanting to make movies, and I have a good 20 ideas. 13 of them
Then you're straight.
13 of them are good, and a bunch of those are great. And but no, it's the process is something. It took me a long time, and I think about that. It took a long time to do it, and I benefited from that amount of time. But the thing is that I didn't have the context to talk to all the people that I talked to. It would be like, I got this person to read it, and then took them, because they didn't really want to read it, took me like 2 months of pestering them for them to ever read the script. And then 5 months after that, this other person that really knows what they're talking about reads it, so that so I did have those back and forths. It was people that I was just like reaching out to. And so I can now I can compress that time. I can be like, okay, what do you think?
I'm sure
about
now
this?
everyone's knocking on your door like, where's the next one?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I have a deal to do a television show, and it's whatever I want to do. And it's with Michael Ellenberg's company, Media Res. He's the guy that, or one of the guys that brought Game of Thrones to HBO. And then that's my friend Jeremy laughing at that for some reason. And then I have a feature deal, which I can't talk about, but it's still whatever I want to do. So yeah, those are there. And I don't know. Yeah, it's a weird thing because I'm always like, I look at my last project and be like, okay, that didn't work. How do I? Because I've always, I thought when we signed to Wild Pitch, I was like, we're gonna have 2 platinum albums, and I'm gonna quit and do Organizer. So
Everyone thought that.
yeah, yeah. And so my dreams were always way bigger than what I had done. So I was like, okay, that didn't work. What do I do and still stick with the things that I feel are good, and how do I make it bigger? So that's always been a drive. Luckily, I don't think we're going to do as many numbers as Get Out, so I have a drive to get to. You know what I'm saying?
Have you read your Metacritic score? Yeah,
But
this could do that.
yeah, maybe. But the point is that, so I just have to look for, my goals are way bigger than those numbers. There are things that I want it to do. The goals have to do with how I want it to affect people and how I want it to affect the world. So those are the, I always have to have something that I'm driving for. And that's all I need to do is figure out what that drive is. And I have some ideas about that. So we'll see. Maybe it'll suck.
Stop saying that.
We have time for a few questions, and it seems like we have more than a few questions. Okay, I'm going to start with you. On the right. Glasses. Totally arbitrary. Let's go.
Shirtless? No. Sleeveless?
Black dude.
No, first and foremost, thank you so much for y'all being here. Thank you for this film. I legit DM'd you as soon as I saw this film in the middle of the night and just like freaked out and said, I should just say thank you and just leave. But when I think about this film, I can't help but think about Killer of the Sheep on acid. And I can't help but think about how it's in the violence that a lot of us are made, but even more so, they're in the moments of the silence where we listen to ourselves hearing Dina Washington in the background singing Bitter Earth, that we really hear some truth. So I'm wondering, from an artistic perspective, from a filmmaker, where was the moments that you got to listen to yourself, balancing the external violence of the world and the self-inflicted violence that these characters would put upon themselves?
You're saying the moments in my real
That was
life
deep.
or the moments in the film?
The moments in your real life where you're able to sit with yourself and balance the two.
Well, when you're writing and are stuck for ideas, you're sitting with yourself a lot. And so I had a lot of those moments. And but yeah, you have to kind of, well, it's always, for me, very self-reflective. Sometimes I'll write, and I always did this with songs, like I'll be like, I'll lose exactly what it is that I set out to do, because you're kind of coming up with some stylistic things and like, okay, am I getting away from myself or the idea? And so I'll like write an essay, or not really an essay, but just like a brainstorm of my thoughts about the thing. And it might be like a whole like 2 pages of something that kind of really doesn't make sense, but then it helps me center what I'm thinking. Because yeah, that's a problem, especially now with social media and everything. I have to like go someplace where I don't have internet, or you know, because you'll want to look things up, you'll want to talk to people about it, like, because that's like how we are. We're social beings. So yeah, during it, I did that a lot. And you know, you mentioned Killer of Sheep, and for me, those sorts of things are folks that it wasn't just about what they were trying to say; it was how they were trying to say it. And one of the first people I called up after I finished writing the script was Arthur Jaffa, and had like a 4-hour conversation with him, and just on the, you know, because I had heard or read a transcript of something he was talking about creating a new black cinematic language, and I really didn't understand anything he was saying, but I knew that I liked the idea, and so I called him up, and we had a long talk, and I don't know what I got from it, but
you got it.
yeah, I got it. I remember like him saying like, yeah, Spike was holding me back on Crooklyn. I was gonna turn that shit out, something like that. And I was like, wow, okay, I wanna be that. I wanna, you know, I want to have these cinematic goals. I want to, it's not just about what I'm saying, it's about how I'm saying it. And so I was constantly keeping that in my mind. Because you get a chance to make a movie, you might as well do it really well, you know. So
I've also yet to meet an artist or a director or anyone in the arts that can properly, or I guess eloquently, explain their particular personal process with it, at least without time. Like when they're in the moment, I think it's hard for them to come outside of that bubble to see exactly the impact that's having and that sort of thing. Like time, it sort of has to go by for them to really understand it. So maybe that's why his 4-hour explanation even occurred.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that sometimes, if you're media savvy, I could come up with all sorts of things that work and ring, you know, and people will quote it and all that kind of stuff. But will it be actually true? And I'm trying to say things that maybe help other writers or other filmmakers. And it's really elusive. Like there are so many things I think about when I was watching that trailer that almost made it bad. Like the wig that we had for him, that almost got ordered for him. Like that's a wig that he's wearing, and you know, definitely everybody's always trying to cut costs, and somehow, and I had at one point gotten, I forget her name, but she did all the wigs on Key and Peele, and I talked to her because I mean their wigs are good, and I talked to her about it, and somebody along the line kind of, when they're trying to make a budget, like switched it to somebody else. And she was just going to like make the wig and then come, and luckily I caught it in time, because it would have been a joke if it looked like a wig, you know, and it would have made the whole movie would have just been not for just little things like that could easily like escape you and make the whole thing feel a different way. And so those are details that I can control, but there are other things in the process that is our improvisation, and luckily work sometimes.
Other questions? Is there a mic for her? Or I can repeat the question.
Right behind you. Got you.
Peace, peace. Congratulations.
Thank you,
Good to
Tembisa.
see you. Yes. My question is really a mechanical question about the filmmaking after you got the script and everything. What was the journey to getting to your producers, Nina Yang Banjovi and Charles King? And I think that having producers of color or producers who, sort of understand this material really makes a huge difference. And I'm not clear that this movie could have gotten made 10 years ago necessarily. So, talk a little bit about that and how that has eased the process for you as a writer-director or,
Yeah. So I thought I was going to put it out on the internet because I didn't think I could get it made. I ran into Dave Eggers, who publishes McSweeney's, is this writer, and I ran into him.
You ran into him?
Really?
I ran into him on the street on Valencia Street in San Francisco.
That's so random.
And
I thought you were being figurative.
no, I didn't literally collide with him, but and I said, hey, I have this screenplay, and I think I'm going to put it out on the internet, because at this point I'm like, I can't get it made. At least I want people to know that it existed. And maybe 20 years from now, people will be like, did you know Boots Riley wrote this screenplay one time? And so I was like, can you give me some notes, because I want to tighten it up more and before I put it out. And then he was like, he said what he said publicly later, which was, this is one of the best unproduced screenplays I've ever read, and let me put it out as its own paperback book. And he put it out, screenplay format, but bound like a book and packaged with the McSweeney's Quarterly. So it went out to like 10 or 20,000 people that read the Quarterly. And his whole thing was like, look, man, everybody reads this. You can get it out. And this is 2014 by this time. Then I used that to that inspired me to go join SF Film as a filmmaker in residence. Then I met two of the early producers, Jonathan Duffy and George Rush. I applied to Sundance Writers Lab in 2015, got in, which also then, made it seem like a real thing. Like, maybe you should read this script when I send it to you, because all these folks are down with it. Sundance, through SF Film, I met Nina Yang Banjovi, who was interested in it, but still, I had never made a film before, And it was, there's a scene in it that was much bigger before that I had to figure out how, and we can talk about after the stream ends what it was, but that I had to reduce. But at that time, so it was like, wow, how much is this really gonna cost? So that was something in there. And then Sundance brought me to the Catalyst program, which is they pick 12 projects to make a pitch in front of 60 investors or people that want to invest in stuff, and you spend a weekend at the resort drinking and rubbing elbows and making presentations. And that's where I met Charles King. That's where from Macro. That's where I met Phil Engelhorn from CineReach, and Gus Deardoff from the space program. And Gus is a young dude. He's got money. He's like in his 20s, and he was like, I just want to be part of this. And he gave us right then, signed up to give us development money. And by this point, I had been not touring. So that really, in not knowing how to, really questioning my responsibility, my ability to handle responsibilities. And so development money helped us to go on. I got into the director's lab, and then people started taking it more seriously, and eventually conned people into putting money into it.
We have time for one more.
Dun, 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 dun.
When I watched the movie, there was a particular
Sorry,
prop.
one moment. Thank you.
There was a prop, and I was looking for what the word was for when you see a prop in a movie and you don't get the prop until the very end. So I asked a couple of people, and then Byron Sanders told me that the word is plot device. Now this is a spoiler alert, but I love this
Can we
plot.
ask this once we turn off the thing? We'll ask a spoiler thing after, because there are people watching. I think it's this camera.
A few billion people.
There are people watching online that haven't seen the movie. There's enough people in here who've seen it. Huh? Okay, we can once we turn off the camera, you can go and cover your ears.
We can't talk about the end until
We
Facebook
could
is
turn
off.
off the streaming now because this is our last.
Okay, yeah, this is the last question.
So we might as well get
bye-bye.
a juicy, spoilery question.
Thank you. Go see the movie.
Wait, we just cut them off like that? I love it.
So can I say the prop now?
The majority of people in this room have seen it or have not seen it?
Have seen it.
Just close your ears,
By
sing the
show of
national
hands, it
anthem.
looked
Close your
like
ears.
they had.
Well, the prop was an apple early on in the movie. That was great.
Wait a minute. We went through all the way. Get Facebook back online, man. So, were you asking, was there any symbolism behind the apple, or?
Well, it's connected to other stuff, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that was a really joyful note to end on. I'm sorry. They're saying we have to get out of here. Thank you guys so much. The
Thank
movie
you.
is in wide release from Annapurna Pictures. See it. It stands up to at least 3 viewings according to Questlove. So you tell your friends that. It's
Absolutely.
It's really about
And
worth it.
I'll say this, even though y'all, it may seem like everybody's talking about the movie, that's one kind of how social media works. It connects you with people that already are thinking the same stuff, and plus you're in New York. We're trying to break out of that bubble that normally is there, so we appreciate it if you can post about it, because maybe your cousin in Alabama or Iowa doesn't know anything about it, and it can help us break out of that. I mean, really, I don't know, if folks really want to help us out and do email blasts, that's a way we can break out of that social media thing.
So don't steal this movie? All right, I'm quoting an old quote.
Yeah. So, yeah, we need help with that. And of course, please, if you help us out with posting about it, don't spoil it for folks. Let them have the experience that you had. The apple you can spoil. Yeah.